Hello again, everybody. This is Yatzr. Just doing a second introduction video. Um, so I've got the tool installed. I've downloaded recruits. And now there's just a ton of stuff that I can see here. I'm just going to try to go through as much of it as I can to explain everything. So the first thing to talk about is the columns. This first column is the player ID. Not very useful to see the number or to keep track of the number, but you can click on that and it'll open up that recruits page on the What If Sports site. Second column, is the position. That's pretty self-explanatory. Name, also self-explanatory. This next set of columns are the attributes. So athleticism, speed, durability, work ethic, stamina, strength, block, tackle, hands, game instinct, elusiveness, and technique. Those are generally pretty self-explanatory. However, you'll notice that for QBs, the strength is bolded, the game instinct is bolded, and the technique is bolded. If I switch to running back, it's different columns that are bolded. Here it's athleticism, speed, strength, and elusiveness. The way that those are set up, which columns are bolded, that is configurable. If you go to options and then bold columns, you can see that here are the positions, and then you just check which columns you want to be bolded. So you can change that yourself, and anything you change here and save, that'll be saved forever. Next time you open up the tool, it'll still be that way. It'll just be saved that way until you change it. The next column is total. It's really kind of a worthless column. I just include it there for completeness, I guess. But you should really never be judging players by the total. Next column is GPA. After that, it is miles. So this one confuses people a lot because the number you see here is the number that What If Sports says, the number of miles that What If Sports says you are away from that recruit. But if you click on it, then I show this recruit mapping, and I include yourself in here, and a lot of times the number will be slightly different. So What If Sports says that I'm 1,211 miles away. Well, here I'm calculating these distances based on latitude and longitude of the town that the recruit is at and the town that each of these schools are at. So the latitude and longitude that I have might not be exactly what What If Sports uses, so that's why some of these numbers are a little bit off. Generally, they're closer than the 8 miles difference that I have here, and they're usually close enough that you can trust them. So that's one of the differences to keep in mind. So the miles column, that is exactly what If Sports says. The number you see here, as well as the number you see here, those are what I'm calculating based on latitude and longitude. The next column is a pretty important one, this considering column. This tells you what schools the recruit is considering. So all of these recruits that I'm seeing right now are considering a bunch of sim AI schools. So you can see the school name, who the coach is, and then these three numbers. The first number is the number of scholarships that school has available, the number of recruits that school has signed, and then the number of recruits that are green or yellow for that school. Something to keep in mind with this last number, or I should say both of these numbers, is those are only the number that the tool knows about. If you don't grab out of vision recruits, this number, it might be smaller than it actually is, or the number that shows up might be smaller than the actual number of recruits that are considering that school. So as long as you are grabbing out of vision recruits and keeping the tool updated, this should be accurate. If I scroll down a ways, yeah, so here I can see there are some undecided recruits. If you did not update multiples when you grab recruits, then instead of seeing a list of 3 schools like this, you would just see the word multiple. This last number here for each school, that is the estimated distance that school is from that recruit. These are usually pretty close, within 3 miles or so. However, if you see a coach that's right on the cusp of 180 or 360, you got to be kind of careful not to assume that that school actually is, say, 361 miles away as opposed to 359 miles away. Obviously, that doesn't matter for any of these sim AI schools, but if you saw a school with a real-life coach name here, then you'd want to keep that in mind. This next column is the pot column, or potential, rather. When you use the potentials feature, numbers would show up here for any recruits that you've gotten potentials for. I'll cover that more in a video later on. And then I'll skip these next few. The flag column is where you can actually flag recruits that you care about. Just check the box, that flags them. This last column is the action column. That is for using the mass recruiting feature. So you can check a bunch here. You can also you can highlight a bunch of rows. If I click on one row and then hold shift and click on another row, it highlights them all. And then I can right click on that and I can say mark for action. I can also unmark for action. So if I unmark, then it got rid of the checks there. If I go ahead and mark for action, it checks them all, and then I can use the mass recruiting feature. I'll cover that in a separate video later. The columns here, in between the potential column and the flag column, these are your special equation columns. So by default, these will be the guess equation columns. So Bob Hazelwood has put together his formulas that he has for each position. So for quarterback, he's got two formulas, one for just QB normal and one for a running QB. So I've got both of those in the tool by default. You can sort on those. When you switch to, say, running back, here he's got 5 equations, so they all show up. You can change these equations and you can enter more equations of your own by going to Options, Equations. So this UI is a little difficult to use, but it works. So here you can see that for QB, or for every position actually, there's 6 slots for equations. By default, I'm only using up to 5, so running back has 5 equations. So I can put in an equation and I can give it a name, and so that name shows up as the column header. A lot of people get confused by the fact that I cannot right-click to copy or paste out of here, but you can use keyboard shortcuts, Control-C and Control-V to copy and paste. So I can still copy this whole thing and I can paste it somewhere else. You can also hit Control-A to highlight the whole thing. So that's something to keep in mind if you ever need to copy and paste stuff out of this or into it. You can do that. Another thing to show, there are actually more columns that are hidden by default. If you right click anywhere on the column headers, you'll see the list of all the columns. And then the ones with stars are the ones that actually show up. And if you click on one of these, if you click on one that has a star, it'll hide that column. If you click on one that doesn't have a star, it'll show that column. So I actually have columns for all of the formation IQs. I just hide those by default because it's a lot of columns and I don't use that information anyway. I've also, by default, hidden all of the special equation columns that I don't have an equation for. But if you ever wanted to have those show up, you can just click on it and it'll show up. So now that S6 column shows up. I'll go ahead and hide that again. But let's say you didn't want to see that total column. You can actually click on that here and now there's no total column. You can also resize some of these columns. So name, considering, and then the special equation columns. I think those are the only ones that you can actually resize. The other columns, I've already set them up to be a good size for these small numbers. Otherwise it becomes a pain to try to get everything to fit just right. A couple of the new features for version 2.0 is the team info and the analysis. So the analysis is pretty simple. If I hit refresh analysis, it gives me a quick, some stats about my recruits that I've downloaded. So I have a total of 2,670 recruits that are within my vision. I have a total of 553 recruits that are within 360 miles of me, and 278 recruits that are within 180 miles of me. So that's kind of nice to see. If those numbers are really small, it might just be because you picked a bad school. And then there's also the breakdown per position. Nothing extremely useful there, just kind of interesting, and it's easy for me to show that, so I do. This number here is pretty important, the vision score. So this is my way of estimating what your school's vision is. What If Sports uses some hidden equations to rate the recruits on their site. That's how they determine whether or not a recruit falls within your vision. That's also how they determine the top 100 or 250 recruits, whatever the number is. So I've been able to estimate that equation, and then I run it on the offensive lineman, just because that's the position that has the most recruits. And then I just take the highest rated one that is within your vision, and that's what I show here. So by itself, this number doesn't mean much. It really only means something when you compare it from season to season or from school to school. So last season, my vision score was actually 90.8. But I won quite a few more games than the previous season, and my vision score went up to 92.5. So that's nice. And then this number over here is also a very good indicator of how your vision is. So this is the number of recruits that are outside of your vision that are being recruited by other teams in your division. So right now there are 202 recruits outside of my vision that are being recruited by teams in my division. Most of that is probably Sims. So that's kind of sad that there are 202 recruits being recruited by Sims, and they're all outside of my vision. So my vision is still not very good at this school. But every time you open this up, you will need to refresh analysis. That's mostly just for this number here. So once this first cycle is over, this number will probably get much bigger as all of the other human teams start recruiting players. So that's the analysis. The team info is nice. This is another one. There's a button to refresh your team info. This will actually go out to your public team page and just grab the numbers for your team breakdown. So you can see I have 17 scholarships. Here's how much money I have left. Here's my team breakdown. I currently have 33 players. So I have one senior QB, one sophomore QB. I have a junior, sophomore, and freshman running back. So that gives you a nice breakdown. And then here's a box. This is meant to be kind of your scratch pad of how many of that position do I want to recruit. So let's say I want to recruit 2 running backs, 3 wide receivers, 1 tight end, and so on. As soon as you type in this number, it will be saved in the tool. It's kind of like when you check on the flag. As soon as you check on the flag, it's saved. As soon as you enter this number, it's saved. So that's why it'll seem like it takes a second for the number to actually show up. So I would go through and I would fill out how many of each position I want to sign. And then below this, it gives me the breakdown of how many recruits for each position have I flagged, how many do I have yellow, green, and how many have I signed. So that's really nice. It keeps you from having to constantly go back to your team recruiting page on the What If Sports site, or keeps you from having to write it down on a notepad or something. And so you've always got that right there in the tool. Another feature here is this filters. I don't use this very often. I don't know if many other people do. But it's a good way. Let's say you wanted to just flat out hide recruits with a work ethic less than 30. So I can type in a 30 here. And so there's a running back right here, Robert Valentine, has a work ethic of 29. So if I've typed in 30 for work ethic, and then I click this apply filters, he should go away, as well as anybody else that had a work ethic less than 30. I actually never use that just because I really want to see everybody. There's always an extreme case where somebody might have a really low work ethic, but they have great stats everywhere else, and I might want them. So I don't use that, but other people can. The search bar, this one I use all the time. So these first two buttons are handy. This first one is undecided. If I click that, it will show me only recruits that are undecided. So that's really nice, just to find the recruits that are not considering anybody yet. The second button is for showing me only recruits that are being recruited by sim AIs. You can actually use both of these checkboxes at the same time, and that will find you recruits that are undecided or are only considering sim AIs. So that's common. If I want to look for recruits that no human coach is currently going after, then I check those two boxes. This third box, this backups, I'll have to explain this in a separate video because we're not far enough into recruiting. Signings haven't started yet, so nobody's ever going to show up if I check that. This considering field is just kind of a general keyword search. You can search for anything in the considering column. So if I search for Dakota, I'll get anybody that's considering South Dakota State, North Dakota, that kind of thing. It's handy if you want to search for recruits that are considering a specific coach. Otherwise, I don't often use the considering field. The miles is a nice one. If I want to search for people within 180 miles of me, I can just type that in and hit enter, and now I've got everybody that's within 180 miles. Another common search then would be 360 miles. And then these checkboxes are just kind of extra filters. Hide out of vision, I pretty much always have that checked, because if I don't check it, then I'll end up with guys with red names. Those are the guys that I cannot recruit. Hide signed, that I usually end up checking that box. Once a player has been signed, the text in this considering column will turn blue. So obviously that's a player that I cannot sign because they've already signed with somebody else. So I'll usually check the hide signed box just to hide them. And then this last one I explained in the first video, and that's just to show all of your flagged recruits. So that is most of the generic features. I'll be covering everything else in other videos later on. So watch out for those.